And we are here with Drew Herndon, host of the Let Me Get That Podagraph podcast, as well as the Roughing the Passer podcast, a live video NFL show on Sunday nights, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Drew, before we get into the card stuff, we got the NFL playoffs coming up or continuing this weekend. What's your crystal ball say for the playoffs and for a Super Bowl prediction?
Oh man, well, first, it's glad to be on, man. Been listening to you for a while, so stoked to be on the show. But yeah, I don't know. This is a interesting playoffs. If I had to go, I got to stick with my original picks. I hate to go back on them, no matter how the teams look and how they may have changed. But my original prediction at the beginning of the year was KC and Minnesota, so I got to stick with it, even though Minnesota scares me a little bit. But the NFC is so out of whack. I think any team could easily come out of there, honestly. So I got KC winning it all. I think this is where Andy Reid finally gets a ring, and Mahomes starts his little ascent to becoming at least one of the next top quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive that you made that prediction, actually, and then those two teams are actually still in it. So that's pretty good there, I think.
Yeah, I like Minnesota. Minnesota's a team that I probably say it too much, but their roster from top to bottom, like 1 to 53, I think is by far the strongest in the league. They don't have like the superstars that everybody has, but they've got the role players and they've got the guys that when it comes playoff time, it's a different type of football. It's not those regular season games, and they've got those guys that come up in those crucial situations. They're a team that I don't like having too much faith in Cousins, which is why I don't have them winning it, but I do see the team getting there.
Yeah, that was just a huge win to win on the road like that in New Orleans, which is like just a super hard place to play and to win on the road. So, hey, I heard recently after one of your Let Me Get That Podagraph episodes that none other than Leaf Trading Cards, quote, CEO, unquote, Brian Gray called you. What was that all about?
Yeah, well, all right, well, I guess he was on Sports Card Nation, my co-host on Roughing the Passer, John Newman's show. He went on his show, and they had an interview on there. It was a good interview, I thought. John asked him some really good questions, I thought. And, they kind of talked a little bit while they were on there about how you handle yourself on social media, so to speak. And John was talking about how he kind of disagreed with, some of the things that we've all seen, how a lot of people, whether it be Brett from PWCC, he's a legend for it. There's quite a lot of people that, just, I don't know. It got to the point where John was talking to him a little bit, and then I followed up the interview on my show, and I talked about it a little bit because I thought it was a good interview, and I commended Brian because I know Brian personally, and he's a great guy. The couple of times I've met him, he's been very nice to me. I have nothing bad to say about him in terms of like anybody that I've met or anything or any dealings that I've had with him. He's been nothing but a great guy. But on the show, I didn't think it was anything out of line or anything rude or I didn't think I was mean at all. But when I was going over the interview, I just said that, when it gets to that, when you're a CEO of a company, when you're somebody in that position so high up, I just think that when it gets into Twitter things where, yes, people are going to call you out, things are going to happen. There's a right way, in my opinion, and a wrong way to handle things. And all I was saying was that I thought that not all the time. I mean, sometimes it's right, but I said just sometimes I think he goes a little too far, and that it probably isn't the best thing to do. And if I was him, that I wouldn't do it. I mean, that's really all I said. You listened to it, and I didn't think it was anything that bad. But yeah, I went down to visit the family down in Florida, and got a phone call from Brian, and I think he just took it the wrong way. Which I've seen him take a couple different things the wrong way. But I think he took it as me attacking him when that wasn't the case whatsoever. It was really just using him as an example because it was something that was just talked about like 2 days before, so I mean, It seems like a current example to use. I was just using that as an example of like how people like Brent being another one from PWCC that drives me crazy, or the guys from StockX, or, take a pick. So many of them that just handle themselves in a way that, I don't know, if it's my company, that's not how I'm going to do it. And that's all really I was saying, but he did not like it too much. We will say that, but we talked for a while, and it wasn't like anything bad or anything. Like I said, we've had a very good relationship, I think, and he's never done anything wrong on, at least by me, and I think we're cool now. At least I would assume we are, but like I said, I stick by what I said. I mean, I'm not going to take back anything that I said because I don't think I was rude whatsoever, and I do believe what I said. If I say it on my show, that's the one thing that I hope my listeners know, is that if I'm going to say it, I mean it. And no matter what it is, if it's on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, I'm careful with what I say. And if I say something, then I mean it. And I do. If that was me, that I would handle certain situations differently. But, yeah, he had a little bit of a problem with that. But I will say, when you're out down in Florida and Tampa, just left Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and you're at dinner and you get a phone call from an angry Brian Gray. It was an interesting few minutes, to say the least.
Why do you think he's gotten upset at me? He's gotten upset at my brother. He's gotten upset at other card bloggers. He's gotten upset at you. I'm sure there's other people I could think of as well. Why do you think, you know him a little bit? You probably know him a little bit better than I do. Why do you think he's so upset right now? Is he stressed about business? I actually didn't. I should have probably listened to the interview he did. I heard that he maybe talked about me, so I tend to pass on those things. But what do you think? What do you think he's upset about, or what is it? Business? Is it personal stuff? Like, do you have a finger or a pulse on that?
No, I mean, I don't. If I did, it would be 1,000% speculation. Now, I will say, just from doing the show and talking to so many people in so many different companies, there's a lot of people and a lot of big companies, whether it be Panini, Beckett, PSA, a lot of people that I know that are incredibly stressed out right now, that just aren't so public about it. So where that's coming from, where that comes from, I'm not sure. I don't know. I know that there is, and like I said, this is all pure 1,000% speculation. But I mean, they've got the Upper Deck and Leaf lawsuits. I'm sure I know a lot of that's going on, a lot of depositions and things going on. I mean, I can only assume a combination of different things. But like I said, I don't exactly know. Like I said, I don't know him that well. We've met a couple of times. We've talked quite a bit, and even when he called me that night, we ended up having an excellent conversation, and he actually told me a lot of stuff about like the trimming scandal, which we'll talk about later, that I did not know. And it was very interesting to learn about, so, I mean, I don't know where it comes from. I think it's probably just a lot of things, as this hobby is, it's exploding at such a rapid pace that I think even for collectors, it can be overwhelming. I can only assume for the people running these companies, it's probably 1,000 times more. And I don't know if it's just different people handling it different ways, what that could be. But, it has, certain people lash out different ways. But I don't know exactly what that could be. And like I said, it would just, if I was saying anything, it would be just 1,000% guess.
You mentioned something there that not only Brian Gray's stressed out, but other people in the hobby too. Yeah. And what do you think is causing that stress? Is it multiple different things? Is it money? Is it just the pressure to churn out these products? Is it coming from collectors? What causes that stress?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it with one of the things you said. And I had Micah he's the product development manager for Panini's baseball brand. I had him on the show just a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to him. I wanted to get a little more in depth and figure out a little bit more of why exactly, like how everything was, the process of cards being made and stuff. And
Sure.
I so much stuff I found out that just blew my mind. But one of them was just how close to release date this stuff is done. Like, it's literally, like, I mean, their excuse to me for not being able to photograph National Treasure RPAs, like all of them together, to prevent patch swapping, was that they didn't have enough time, like, to take pictures. I mean, it's so up to the limit. I think that probably has a lot to do with it. I think is just how they've made it with these exclusives. They signed these agreements. They've got it to where they're pumping so much stuff out. It's coming. It never stops. And when you look at a lot of these other companies like Panini or Topps, I mean, they're into so many other things. We look at it and tend to think of them as just a sports company. I mean, they're out pumping all this other stuff out as well. Right. I think it's just getting to the point where it's so big where it is right there. But then at the same time, I think, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but besides just, like I said, it's exploding so fast. I think it's hard for them to really keep up right now. And I think a lot of them have some great ideas for things to do, but they seem to be like jumping way ahead where if it's me, I'd fix the stuff that's broken before I dive into a million new things. But I don't really know exactly what it is, but you've seen, I do know from 3 years of interviewing people in this industry, I've noticed in the last year that it's been a lot more stressful for a lot of people in those quote unquote, the big boys, if you want to call them that, of the industry. Now, what that is, who knows, and maybe we'll find out one day.
So, let's say they came to you and was like, Drew, we need some help. This is getting, this is getting crazy. We're losing employees to stress and so forth. What would you do? What would you advise them to do to kind of alleviate some of this stress as kind of a collector, as somebody in the business who has a couple different podcasts and really follows this closely? What would you tell them, to help them alleviate the stress? And even if it's broad ideas like splitting up the license or so forth, like what would alleviate some of this pressure and some of this stress on people?
Well, I think that's actually a really good question. And I guess it would probably be the thing that I think is one of the biggest problems in the hobby, which comes down to quality control. And I don't mean necessarily just cards being necessarily off center, but I kind of mean the entire process in general. I think that needs to really be overhauled completely. I think they need to slow down. After that interview with Micah, just hearing him, every time I would ask the question, you could hear it in his voice when he's talking about how close to the limit it is, how stressed they are to get that out, how just insane it is on so many different departments just to get hoops put out or something, not even the big products. I think it's one of those things where they just need to probably, if it's me, I scale some of the products back. I don't think you need as many products, at least official releases now, because you can do things like online exclusives and different little secondary little specialty sets that, before you couldn't do. And so if it's me, I take some of those almost filler sets out.
Sure.
Maybe move some online exclusives. Those, give you a little bit more time. You can do those on, your own accord whenever you feel like. But, I think it honestly comes to just slowing down a little bit. Like collectors, I think we're happy with what we get in a year, I think we get enough variety. I think we get plenty of different options it's one of the things I love. If you want to collect super low-end stuff, there's a ton of stuff for me and my 5-year-old son to open. If you want to just collect some, like Topps Chrome in that whole, little area, there's that. And then if you want to go high-end, you've got that. There's so much stuff already out there. I think that you're at a good balance, that just slow down a little bit. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. But that also falls back to the quality control of you've got to take more time. You've got to take more time getting these out. And, one of the biggest things I learned was that all these cards from Topps, Panini, Leaf, all of them are all printed at the exact same place.
Okay.
The same company prints every single card pretty much in the hobby. And that's where the relics and everything are assembled. Even for things like Flawless and National Treasures. I had no idea about this. And so this company, I think, also probably has, and they're the ones that also do Magic the Gathering, most trading card games. This company does everything. Like they're called Cartamundi. Someplace out in like Belgium, I think, is where they're located at, and they have like United States office. Well, they print like every single card for every company. Wow. And I think that they're so overloaded. I think it's just a combination of a million things. I think they need to get back to just scaling back and maybe at least taking some of those products away and just slowing down a little bit.
What do you think of the licensing? We're in a kind of an age of cards where all the major sports are locked up into an exclusive with one company or another. What do you think about that?
I think licensing is great. I think exclusive licensing is horseshit. I can't stand it. You've seen it to the point where, look at Andre Robertson for Oklahoma City this year. He's got, I think, 5 different releases already, same different picture, and it's the same picture from 5 years ago. Like, it's gotten to the point where, these guys have rookie photo shoots, for God's sakes. They literally have them out there, and they have complete and total access for the day, and we get 3 total images. It's gotten to the point, like, you have hours of these guys, and we get 3. Like, really? And no action shots for veterans. It's bullshit. Let's be honest. It's ridiculous. And that did not happen back then. I do like the licensing, and I don't want to ever see it go back to how it was in the 90s, where you could just have these, like, people like these iconic ink pieces of shit try and pop up and try and, actually try and sell legit cards. Like, I don't want it to ever get like that again, because that's where I think we just get to where it just gets ruined. I like having a small amount of companies making them, but I absolutely can't stand one license per. And, I'm someone personally that doesn't mind unlicensed too much, especially in certain sports. It doesn't bother me as much, but I think it really needs to go away, at least back to a couple. At least open it up and let a couple people have a license. But from everybody that I've talked to, whether it be someone from Panini, Topps, Leaf, Upper Deck, anyone, they all seem to think it's here to stay for a long time, and that if that's going to be changing, that's going to be changing in something like 20 years down the line. Unfortunately, it seems like at least everyone thinks, unless something massive changes, that's pretty much here to stay, and that has a lot to do, I think, with the sport leagues themselves like it that way. They only have to deal with one group of people. Sure. It's simple for them. They don't have to devote as much time to it. It's a win-win for the sport leagues, which I think is another main reason that, it'll probably never change, sadly.
Sure, yeah, and you see them go the exclusive with, video games sometimes, and the apparel, and, a lot of their different lines end up kind of in exclusive, especially kind of where, there's a lot of money involved. Like you said, they only want to deal with one group and not two. Especially like you said, it's these companies are so stressed out. It's so difficult, it seems like, to produce these sports cards. Throwing another license into the mix, I could see from the league perspective, they don't even want to play with that. So last year we had 2019, several big scandals in the sports card world. Probably the biggest, and you touched on it a little bit with your conversation with Brian Gray, was the trimming scandal. What's your take? It's ongoing, obviously. What's your take on all that stuff, kind of up till now, on all the stuff that has come out, kind of with the trimming scandal?
Well, I mean, the one thing that comes to mind is just fucking, it's insane. Like, I mean, it's crazy to me seeing what we can see, and kudos to those guys over at Blowout. I mean, they need to start like I mean, the federal government, when they're done with this investigation and the FBI, they need to be going and talking to these guys about hiring them. I mean, it's like, seriously, the work that they do to find some of this stuff out is just, it's so impressive. And it's rough, and it's something that, it's one of those things where technology has really made it so easy for them to do. Because like I was saying when I was speaking with Brian Gray, we were talking about the trimming scandal some and stuff about it, and he was telling me, even because I just assumed, they took, you take a trimmer a little bit, and they've got these ones like lasers now or whatever that you can take microscopic pieces off, and I figured that's how they were doing like this trimming stuff. And they're going so far as to getting these other machines, they're literally flattening and pressing the card down to where the card's a little bit bigger, and then trimming that bit off so it's still the same size. I mean, this technology is just getting insane for them to be able to do it. And I think it really comes down to, all of this could have been prevented, at least on the graded side. This stuff could have been prevented if the grading companies would start having a little more, taking a little more time and tracking this stuff a lot more. Like the patch swapping, the trimming, a lot of this stuff would have never been happening, would have easily been caught if, I mean, for God's sakes, I thought it was insane when I found out that there wasn't like a database of pictures of cards that were graded. It just blew my mind. I was like, how can you start a company and grade this stuff and not have a picture to go along with like the thing? And they didn't, and it just, I mean, now Beckett's getting one, or SGC's got one, and it looks like the other grading companies are going to follow suit soon. But it's just like simple things like that made it to the point where, I mean, it's been going on forever. It's been going on for a very long time. I mean, some of these cards that we're seeing, they were trimmed like 20, 30 years ago. So, I mean, it's by far nothing new. But I think once they saw the explosion and you started to see these record sales, and you really started to see I know this is a trigger word to a lot of people, but when you saw a lot of the investors coming into the hobby and starting to take off, I think you saw a lot of people. That's when, it really got ramped up a little bit. Now, also probably if they had the internet and Blowout forums back then, they probably would have caught a lot of stuff then too. So, but it's to a point now where I think, I don't know exactly what it is. If it's, some big ring, it seems to be. It seems to be Moser and a bunch of people that he's trained. It looks like they all seem to have some connections together. I'm going to be interested to see what all of those actually end up being, and hopefully we find all that stuff out. But it's disappointing because I love this hobby, dude. I mean, this is something that's just always been fun for me, and it's always been something that I enjoy, and I hate this crap. Like, this isn't what I want to have to be talking about. It's not what I want to see. And you want to hope at least that there's some integrity in this, but the lack of transparency and the lack of regulation in this hobby, and then the explosion that we had so quick, I think it was just inevitable that something along these lines was going to happen.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and we're almost coming up on a year since of all this news is broken. Like you said, there's about 3 guys on the Blowout forum. I think there's like a Check on My Card user, Super Dan, Corn Dog. So I mean, those guys to this day are still posting cards before and after pictures of cards that are trimmed. Do you grade cards yourself? Do you send in stuff to Beckett or PSA?
Occasionally, mostly PC stuff. Occasionally, I will do stuff like I do a lot of rainbows, and then I super collect an East Carolina guy, Bryce Williams, that no one else collects. So I've got literally almost every single one of his cards and all of his one-on-ones that he has. So I'll send those in, just for looks or so, like when I finish this Prism Rainbow, and occasionally if I get something nice, I will. But I'm not somebody that bulk subs like, hundreds of cards a month or anything. I mean, I understand why people do it, because right now, I mean, why wouldn't you? People are paying the money. I mean, if that's what you want to do, and that's the route you want to go, that's fine. Me personally, I think there's a lot of easier ways to, make that money in this hobby and everything that you're doing. So I choose to do it for, just some nice things that I might want to keep around and keep protected. But no, I'm not one of those guys that everything that I pull has to go get graded.
What would you like to see from a grading company? It could be a grading company. It could be PSA, BGS, or SGC getting their shit together. But what would you like to see from a grading company to kind of address some of these issues with the card trimming?
Well, I mean, I'd like transparency, this comes for all companies. I think there's such a lack of transparency in this hobby, and especially in the grading card industry. And I keep hearing the excuse of, well, that'll give away trade secrets. No, it won't. It's not too hard, and it's not too much to ask for a graded card to have a report issued with it that shows where flaws are, that shows why this flaw was there to begin with, to show where this is, the reasoning behind this, and to have documentation of what that card looks like. Even unnumbered cards, as we've seen from all of this trimming scandal, there are specific markings and ways to tell on every single card. So if you have those pictures and have them graded, and you have a database like that, a lot of that stuff gets eliminated. And I think what it ultimately comes down to, and really PSA is really who I'm talking to on this one at the most. They've got to almost, if I'm them, I shut it off for a minute and I say, we're not taking any more submissions. You catch up, because they're so far behind, it's insane. You catch up, and then you implement. I don't care if honestly, since I don't grade that much, it doesn't bother me. If they had to up the price, that's fine to me. If you have to take more time, pay in a couple different more employees, take the time, put out some standards that people see, and when you show these, I think the flaws, like a flaw report and things like that, need to be shown. And I think stuff like that is going to need to be done, besides going computer automated. I think stuff like centering and things like that, we're not far away from that. And I think that part of it will get pretty good soon. But if we're going to keep the completely subjective person, looking at it and doing the entire process deal, then there needs to be a much more detailed and transparent process of how this happened and why this flaw is there. And, I think ultimately they need to slow down. Like, it just, I understand they get a ton of them in. You want to pump them out. I totally get it from a business standpoint. But if you want it to mean anything more than just protection in 10 years, then you got to slow down and you got to fix it. You've got to fix the process.
Yeah, right now it's just such a crazy time. They're probably trying to grab all this business, and like you said, they're backlogged, and there's only really 2.5, 3 of these companies that are trusted in terms of grading these sports cards. Another issue, and maybe you can speak about with these grading card companies, is the patch swapping. So what'll happen is somebody will buy a card either raw or maybe it's even graded. They'll crack it out, and then they'll put a better patch on the card, put a fake patch on the card, make it a more desirable looking patch. Then they'll send it into PSA or BGS. PSA and BGS, again, as you mentioned, don't have a picture database of cards that they have graded. Panini Topps don't have a database of cards that they've made, jersey cards that they've made. So PSA and BGS, they don't evaluate, or I guess they don't look at it too close, the authenticity of the patch itself.
Oh,
So,
no. Hey, I'll tell you exactly how much they look at the patch. The patch isn't looked at all. The patch is not considered at all in grading.
I mean, this is a
At all.
huge problem, isn't it? Because you could take a one color, get it home, put a patch on it, send it to BGS. I mean, who cares? I mean, as long as you're not getting a BGS 6. I mean, I think if you're getting an 8.5 or above, you're feeling pretty good, because then that is, I mean, as a collector, you're looking at that, and I think an average collector would look at that and they think that is a real patch card, that the grade and it being encapsulated almost authenticates the card.
Yeah, this is something that there's a podcast, Wax Museum, who's been following this stuff a lot, and he's come on my show a couple times, and he actually had one of the guys that actually swapped one of the patches on his show, talking about it, and it's quite humorous to listen to some of these answers of reasons why he did this crap and everything. It's hilarious to me. I highly recommend all of your listeners check that one out.
I think so.
But it's so ridiculous. And guys, when we're talking about, you might say, well, okay, they're swapping it out, big deal, it changes the value, $20. No. We're talking about Kawhi, Curry, National Treasure rookie RPAs. These are between like $5,000 and $20,000 and $30,000 value differences in patches. Like these changes are enormous on the cards that they're doing these on, and it's a major problem. And that's why when I was speaking with Panini, I asked them, I said, look, to stop this, there's a very easy way to stop it. And Upper Deck tried to do it with the Crosby when Crosby was coming out. And even though people have swapped a bunch of them, they're immediately caught because Upper Deck had the genius idea of putting all of them together and taking a freaking picture. So they have the picture of all of them together so you know what they look like. And so that's what I brought up to them, that when you have, we don't need it for Donruss's retail exclusives. I don't need a picture of 50,000 napkins. Sure. That's fine. I don't need those pictures. But when you're getting into flawless National Treasures, immaculate, things like that you know are cards that if a rookie pans out are going to be, the ultimate card of that era. Well, as a company, you would think you'd want the card to always be, as authentic and as pristine and as beautiful as what you expected it and wanted it to be. But yet they don't quote unquote have the time to take the picture. But then you get to the grading companies and they don't even look at the patches. The patch means nothing. They look at the window and see if there's a mark around it that's going to mess up the surface or edges, and that's it. And now they're starting to say, because I've been pushing a lot on this, and so is Ryan over at Wax Museum, a lot of at the grading companies. We've been emailing and talking to them. And to their credit, they've been awesome with talking to us, working with us, and trying to figure out a way that we can change this process a little bit just to fix it and prevent some of this stuff. And so hopefully we get to that point soon, because, I mean, like you said, and a lot of these are being bought as graded cards already and being cracked and being resubbed through somewhere else, and even through the same grading company sometimes. And it's mind blowing to me, and it just shows you that there's just not enough attention being paid to it. And maybe that was fine in 98, 2002, when this stuff really wasn't worth that much, and it was just kind of something fun to do, and the economy was starting to begin to tank here pretty soon, and no one gave a fuck about cards at all. But that's not what this is now. I mean, Panini and Topps are pretty much trying to turn cards from a hobby into a commodity. And so, I mean, it's a completely different time now. This stuff matters, and this stuff is big business. You've got to change this stuff. Otherwise, the people that are going to spend this money and the people that are going to want to actually be involved in this, they're not going to trust it anymore, and they're going to leave. And that happens, well, we've all seen what happens when everyone leaves.
Yeah, we've done that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think you mentioned the other podcasts getting involved and actually kind of really making a difference in terms of some of these kind of controversies and issues that happen in the sports card world? Do you think and there's probably 12 or 15 sports card podcasts now. Do you think sports card podcasts should be obligated to talk about the controversies and some of the negative stuff that happens?
I mean, I think for one, it depends on, I guess first and foremost, it would depend on what your show's about. If your show's strictly about I'm about to start I've got a couple more shows coming out. I'm going to have quite a few this year. Nice. But we've if it's something where you're just opening and talking about wax, and that's it, maybe you don't, that's not what you focus on because, maybe that's not what the show's about. If it's something like my show, for instance, where I try and cover the entire hobby and what's going on in the hobby, and in addition to, interesting people that, we have whatever it may be, but the entire hobby, then yes, at least in my opinion, I feel obligated to talk about it. Now, do I feel obligated to talk about it every single week and beat it into the ground? Right. No, because I don't think that really does any good, and I don't think a lot of people want to hear no updates whatsoever. But I think that everyone does need to at least that if you're going to have a podcast that's talking about the hobby and what's going on in the hobby, I think yes, you should have some obligation to report at least when there's big news. Now, I mean, you don't need to spend 2 hours talking about it and ranting and raving and, giving your major opinions and all this stuff and have 20 different experts in. None of that. But, I mean, discussing it, talking about it, and making people aware of it, I kind of think that's our job in a way. Like, if that's what your show's about, talking about the hobby, then, I think you're doing your listeners a disservice by not at least informing them of everything that's going on.
Right. And that trimming scandal story was so big. I get kind of some of the little stuff that happens day to day, but the trimming stuff was so big that I was, and it touched on so many different things. It was modern cards, it was vintage cards, it was even some lower end cards, sub $100 cards were getting trimmed and stuff, so are getting discovered that was trimmed. So I think your take's good. So who would you want? Are there some people that you would want to interview on your show that you haven't been able to get yet? Or who would you want to get on your show and talk to?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I've been fortunate to have a ton of amazing guests on the show, but I guess there's a couple. And a lot of them would be athletes. I've had a couple, like Bryce Williams, a guy I collect. He's been on the show. But I'd like a couple of more high-profile athletes. I would love Jerry Jones and Dak Prescott.
Okay.
Simply for the fact that one of our very first episodes was our show really debuted right when the Dak Auto Pen stuff dropped, and when Steve Grad was on it,
I remember that.
He was the one that gave a lot of information on that stuff on our show. Like, he actually revealed a lot of the issues of that stuff, and so I would kind of like to talk to them a little bit, or possibly Troy Aikman, to ask him if he how many of those autographs did he use an auto pen on for Topps, right. Someone like that. But no, in terms of just people in the industry and stuff like that, gosh, that would be James Beckett would be one.
Okay.
Obviously, that would be a really big one. And then I don't want to butcher the name here. I'm gonna attempt to say it right. I hope I don't kill it, but let's see here. Hold on. I gotta see exactly how to pronounce this last name here. But he's basically responsible for a lot of cards in this world. Upper Deck Exquisite. A lot of different stuff working at Upper Deck. He was a visionary in terms of building a lot of sets that we're quite accustomed to now, and that have become legendary. And his name's Carvin Chung.
Carvin, yeah.
And he works for GTS now. And he's somebody that I would absolutely love to have on the show just to talk to him, because I'm really big into the designing of cards. And so he would probably be somebody, and then obviously Dr. James Beckett, because I'd have a million questions for him as well.
Sure. Yeah. Carvin's actually a nice guy. I had him on my show like very briefly. I think sometime last year we were at the Tops conference and I talked, he had a lot of good, so many stories that unfortunately I couldn't say on the podcast or talk about. He has stories for days about his time in the upper deck and creating the cards. And like you said, he's kind of the godfather of exquisite and kind of this high end stuff and putting it all together. You should reach out to him because he'd probably be game to do it and talk about some of the safer stuff. He can't talk about any of the good stuff, but if you catch him at a show or we were at the Tops conference and oh my God, him and the owner of DA Car World has stories that I wish I could tell them on the podcast. And you get a couple drinks in these guys, and the stories just flow even better.
Oh yeah, that I will agree with you there. I'm right there with you on some stories that I wish that could see the light of day. But yeah, Carvin would be somebody just because, for one, exquisite is something that I love so much, and I think looking back, that was one of those cards that really took the hobby to a whole new level when those came out. And just so he would probably be one of them, at least in terms of realistic people, since I know Jerry and Troy aren't jumping on anytime soon. Not quite that big yet, but you know.
You got time. You got plenty of time to get to the A-list athletes and stuff.
That we do.
Who was the last person that you got an autograph from?
Oh, last person that I got an autograph from. Let's see. Last person that I got an autograph from would probably be. Wow, that's a really good question. PJ Washington during the Hornets. I went to one of the Hornets preseason games. So PJ Washington, who's I know you probably know, rookie this year for the Hornets. I absolutely love the kid. Think he's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
But was able to get his auto. Just wanted one of the in-person ones. I love collecting in-person autos for the collection. So he was the last one that I probably got an autograph of, I believe.
Do you go to a lot of games or practices, or how do you get the in-person stuff?
Yeah, try to. My family's we've been PSL ticket holders of the Carolina Panthers since day one, since game one. So we've had season tickets for their entire existence, and their player parking lot makes it incredibly easy. Between that and spring training camp and stuff like that, autographs like those, I like to take. I take Jude now that he's old enough to training camp, and that's how we get the Panther ones and stuff. And then the Hornets, my buddy Daniel, he actually is the autograph. He's one of those autograph hounds. He'll find out the hotel they're at or something. So, I'll just drive down about a little bit down. Even if I don't go to the game and I just need to be down in the area, I'll go stop by and see him right before they're there. And, he's been waiting, picked out the good spot, run up, hang out with him, grab a few, and then bounce out. So, different ways. But there's also right here in North Carolina, for baseball at least, there's so many minor league teams, like right here between Charlotte, Winston, Greensboro, Hickory. I mean, there's like 10, 12 different teams. So baseball, at least minor league, is incredibly easy to get.
That's a really nice AAA stadium there in Charlotte there. Is it the White Sox still? Are they still the White Sox?
Yeah.
Do you ever head out? I got stuck in Charlotte for a couple of days, and so I went to a couple of games there. You ever make it to many games there?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful stadium, man. Really absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. Very, very nice. It is still the White Sox. They've got a really good vibe down there. A lot of the good teams. The Hickory Stadium's nice, one in Winston. There's a lot of good minor league baseball up in North Carolina, which is nice. I love watching. I like minor league baseball more than going to pro games, at least. even though I did get to go see Pete Alonso at the National, and that was pretty cool. But I like minor league games a little bit more, at least for Take and Jude. They just make it a little bit more fun for the kids.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, for sure. And cheaper too.
Big time.
Drew, how can people get a hold of you? How can they hear your podcast? What's the best way to kind of find you?
I'm pretty much all over social media, but you guys can find us over on Twitter at LGTP Podcast, and then on Instagram as LGT Podagraph, or just look for Let Me Get That Podagraph. As far as the show goes, we're on pretty much every single platform except for Spotify, because even though I own the rights to all the music that's played on the show, they will not put it on Spotify because they're stupid. So you can find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, all of that stuff. And then we've got Roughing the Passer, which is a weekly football show that myself and John Newman from Sports Card Nation does. And you can find that on Facebook. Just search Roughing the Passer, or YouTube as well. So lots of content here coming out, and a whole lot more coming this year. Lots of fun stuff coming. So looking forward to it.
Well, that's really exciting. So thanks for coming on the Sports Card Radio R-Rated podcast, and we'll talk to you again sometime.
Absolutely, man. Thanks.
For sure, buddy.